Good morning, everyone. We're going to get our webinar started for today. I'd like to welcome everybody who's joined us for the Bringing Stories to Life for Young Children, Increasing Opportunities for Participation and Learning. We're very excited today to have as our presenter Lynn Bartz. Many of you know Lynn from her work at CFC 21 and her work with the training program, and Lynn brings 20 plus years of experience in the field. And I think you'll be very excited with the presentation that you hear today and participate in. Also today you'll be hearing from our moderators, myself, Ted Burke, and Maria Maddox, who is a consultant with the training program and our moderator throughout our entire winter webinar series.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to have so many people from all across the state, and Maria getting up so early across the country to really help us and talk about this wonderful topic. So thanks so much for your participation already. We're going to be really thinking a bit about an adaptation that, from my perspective, could be really useful for families and child care providers as we think about emerging literacy today. Before we dive into story boxes and specifically what they are and how they can be used, let's talk just a little bit, just a couple reminders about emerging literacy so that we make sure that we're all on the same page as we move forward today. So we know that emerging literacy can really begin prenatally. Parents quite often are reading and talking to their babies before they're born, and we know that that journey continues on really throughout the lifespan. As you see in this picture of these two little ones, they really are learning through their senses. They use those everyday experiences to really learn about the materials that they have ready access to, through those conversations and communication they have with one another and with those important caregivers in their life. And so we know that literacy, at really its most basic function, is the ability to communicate. And so we can help parents and other caregivers to think about how to promote that for infants and toddlers to help really get them on the road to becoming literate, the ability to really share and communicate both their feelings, their thoughts, their ideas, their hopes and dreams verbally, as well as through the written word and being able to read. And so I love this photograph. It really shows the opportunity for social interactions and the ability for kids to have hands-on experiences using their eyes and their hands to explore this book as they learn about what it is and how it works. We also know that emerging literacy skills really happen within the context of those everyday routines with the people that infants and toddlers really are madly in love with. This picture to me just demonstrates those everyday moments that can happen really naturally, as well as moments that are planned to help infants and toddlers learn how to handle a book, turn the pages of the book. They start to begin to associate the words that they hear their parents and other caregivers using to correspond with, quite often, the pictures that we see in our books that are made for infants and toddlers. So literacy, book handling, those shared reading experiences really can be a whole child learning experience for our infants and toddlers. As you can see in this picture, infants and toddlers start to really become more involved in book sharing. They start to be able to turn the pages on their own. They start to begin to make choices in the books they want read. They start imitating sounds that they hear of the animals that they see in the books, and it really can become a nice give and take communication activity between parents, caregivers, and other relatives with young children. And we wouldn't really be thinking about literacy really in the whole context if we weren't reminded about all of those everyday experiences that infants and toddlers have to use materials that ultimately they'll be be learning to read and write with. So as infants and toddlers grow and develop through those experiences that they have with their responsive caregivers, their grasp becomes refined as they hold crayons, and those scribbles that we see on paper ultimately start to turn into lines, which through, again, repeated practice and opportunities through everyday routines and planned experiences ultimately will turn into words on paper for most kids. And so we can think about everyday routines. So as I look at this mom and her young daughter, I wonder about opportunities for them when they're at the grocery store, for this little one to be able to use her crayon to help mark off the items of a picture grocery list that they might put together. And so we also can think about how to support kids of all abilities through some of the strategies that we've learned really over time. And so as infants and toddlers begin to really get older and move towards preschool, they become even more interactive in their relationships and through those storytelling experiences. As we look at this picture, this mom has chosen to really provide a book that was larger so that her child had an easier time looking at the pictures, and as you can see, he really has become engaged in this learning experience with his mom and what looks like to be his sibling.
Thanks, Lynn.
So Maria, wondering if you might want to...
Yes, so Lynn has another poll here for us, so everyone get ready. The question to you is, what are emerging literacy skills for infants and toddlers? So you have 5 choices there. We'll give you a minute or so to respond. Responses are coming in. That's great. All right, give folks a few more seconds to finish responding, and make sure you are using the poll function, that last square icon right below your name, to respond to the poll. Okay. Looks like folks are slowing down here, so let's just see what your responses were. So Lynn, overwhelmingly, they have chosen that all of those activities are emerging literacy skills. So I'm hoping that was the response that you were looking for. All right, Lynn?
It is. That's great. And so all of these strategies really, or all of these skills, foundational skills really that we're seeing here can really help kids on the road to becoming literate. And so it's important for us to think about typical development, because really we can build upon that foundation as we move towards talking about children of all abilities. And we really are going to get there and thinking about the specific strategy related to story boxes. And so thanks so much for your questions that you've been typing in. So as we think about strategies that we really have learned over time, we've learned so much through the early childhood special education field. We've learned so much from teachers and strategies that are used for preschoolers of all abilities. And we can think about many of those strategies and apply them to infants and toddlers. We may modify those activities to make sure that they're developmentally appropriate for infants and toddlers. Let's take a look at some of the ways that we really have integrated promoting literacy for infants and toddlers of all abilities. I love it because they start to really look like universal approaches to learning for me. And so again, here's really an example of a storyteller. This could be a mom or a family child care provider who really is using a large book with bigger pictures to be able to engage children who might need to see pictures that are larger for them. These have been around for a long time, and they're readily available on the internet, at bookstores, and libraries have actually started to do a much better job of having a variety of big books for families to take advantage of out in the community. We also know that thinking about the environment can really help to promote independence and engagement for infants and toddlers. And so more and more, both parents and caregivers and community settings have books that are down low so that children have access to them. They have the opportunity to be able to start making choices about the books that they want to use. And so that's another strategy that can be super helpful in creating a literacy-rich environment for kids of all abilities. We also know that over time our books and through research, what we really have learned about infants and toddlers is that they are so much more engaged when they have pictures that are real, like demonstrated in this photograph of familiar people. And so these books quite often can be bought in the store where you'll see they only have 1 or 2 words so that the child's attention is really drawn to the photograph. We also know that there are opportunities for us and families to create these books on their own so that we can help kids be engaged with books that are about things that they like, people that they like. So in this example, you'll see some photographs that have been printed of real kids, as well as some pictures that have come out of magazines. And families use granola boxes, file folders, any really kind of sturdy cardboard can be used to help create handmade books in any size with real pictures of the actual child or places that they go to help create a literacy-rich experience for them. We also know that tactile books can be a wonderful strategy that can help a child who really needs another source for them to learn about this object that they may hear being read to them, or the words on the page. And so we know, again, there's a couple examples on your screen of both store-bought tactile books as well as handmade tactile books, and using both fabric to recreate a dog so that a child can feel that as they're being read to, as well as read stickers. And I love all the strategies that I see folks are typing in their text box. And so I'm looking forward to Maria helping us to kind of think about those as we move forward. I'm wondering if it might be an opportunity to just highlight. Yep, so I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Rabia. What a wonderful idea. Audio books, tactile books, books to scratch and sniff. I love those ideas. Thank you so much for sharing those. So again, thinking about the other senses that our infants and toddlers can use to really learn about experiences. So thanks so much. Please keep those ideas coming. Teachers have long been using flannel boards within the classroom to engage children, to help kids that really want and need to move, to involve them in the storytelling, to help recreate the story and make stories up. And for many children, this is a wonderful strategy, but for many other children, they really need something more three-dimensional, something that adds sense, as the idea that was shared earlier, to really help them engage and learn about the objects and stories that are being read to them. So let's take another quick poll.
Okay. So Lynn would like to know what you feel infants and toddlers learn literacy skills through. So again, use your poll function. You have 4 choices here, and we'll give folks a minute or so to respond to this poll. And while we're waiting, as questions keep coming in, just please use the chat box to put your questions, and hey, respond to each other. That's a great use of the chat box. Lots of great ideas coming through already. We appreciate that. Please use your poll function to respond to the chat, to the question. That would be great. We'll give folks another few seconds or so to finish responding. All right. Another few seconds here. Okay, looks like folks have pretty much slowed response, so here we go. Looks like, Lynn, they chose all of the above yet again, so I'm hoping that was the response that you were looking for.
It was great, thanks. And so I know that in your work, really probably in all of your work on your daily experiences with families, that you're helping them to think about all of the ways that they can help their child through those everyday experiences by really talking with them and giving them those opportunities to explore materials and using really easy adaptations to help make meaning and kids become engaged. So again, thank you for all those ideas that are coming through. I'm seeing one about dressing up and acting out stories is a great way to increase engagement. Gosh, we could have a whole webinar just on engagement strategies and have everyone really share all those ideas. Yes, finger puppets. And again, as I think about all of the opportunities available for kids and families, we can think about those items that they have in their home so that we might not have to think about going and purchasing items. So, Very Hungry Caterpillar, we are on our way and thinking about that. So I love that folks are already sharing some ideas of story pages, stories that they use. Before we dive into story boxes and specifically what they are, it really, and I love that folks are taking us there already, it's important for us to think about how much incidental learning happens through our vision. As you think about it and look at this picture of this toddler, we can see the natural interaction when they're with a responsive caregiver. Baby looks at something and their parent notices it. They may say, oh, you see the bird, don't you? Yes, that's a bird in the tree that you see. And as the child gets older, we build upon that. Do you hear that bird singing to you? That bird is blue. We build upon that and add more meaning for the child as they get older. And vision really helps them to create those experiences. And so it's important for parents to pay attention to what kids are looking at and being responsive in relationship to that. And so as we think about all of that learning that happens for kids who have this natural ability through their vision to be able to help guide parents and caregivers to what they want to know more about, it's really important for us to think about kids with visual impairments because those opportunities don't happen naturally. So it's important for us to really be mindful and to think about how can we help this child to really learn what bird means, because they aren't seeing it, or they might not be seeing it as easily as a child whose vision is typically developing. So story boxes really are a wonderful way to help support a child that has a vision impairment to be able to explore materials in a hands-on way. And so before we dive into that, wondering if folks have any additional questions. I think you guys have been really using the chat box to share some wonderful ideas. Let's take a moment.
Right. Lynn, it looks like right now the question really had to do with engagement and children with visual or peripheral visual impairments. I've been kind of scrolling through. There's been lots of great strategies already shared amongst each other. That is awesome. I'm not seeing any other questions that have come up at this point in time. We'll give folks another minute or so if they have any questions they want to ask at this time. Otherwise, Lynn, do you have anything else you wanted to say about any of the comments that you're seeing there?
I'm hoping there's a way we can capture all of these wonderful ideas, actually. So I'm just really appreciative of everyone's involvement and everyone's participation today because, gosh, we really learned so much from one another. So I just want to say thank you for everybody's involvement so early in the morning on a Wednesday.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move forward, Lynn.
Great. So let's think really about what is a story box. And so in thinking back to the second poll that Maria facilitated for us, there were lots of you who had heard of story boxes but hadn't used them in their practice, and many of you who were unfamiliar with them. And so I'm excited to be able to share a bit with you, and hopefully will create an interest that you'll want to go learn more after our webinar. Once we're finished today, we will be sending you actually a link to a handout that was created by Norma Driscoll, who actually was the creator of story boxes. Norma Driscoll really intended that story boxes were going to be used to really enhance opportunities for young children with visual impairment to be able to make meaning of the words in stories. As we talked about earlier, very young children can often begin to make meaning of the words read in a story by looking at the pictures. Children also may have objects to explore related to that story that look like the image in the book, which really gives them increased opportunities for learning. And because we know that really the ability to explore items in so many ways gives infants and toddlers those opportunities to learn about objects in their world, it's important for us to really be mindful, again, as we talked about earlier, to meet the unique learning approaches of all kids. And story boxes can be a really helpful way to help a child to learn what the word pig looks like as they're reading a story about farm animals with their parents. And so we know that really nothing beats the real thing. And so as I think about, reading stories, it's not very likely that we're going to be able to have a real caterpillar running around for a child to be able to have that hands-on experience on a regular basis, but we can have a stuffed caterpillar. And so thanks so much for our participants Patricia, thanks so much for starting the conversation about the hungry caterpillar and thinking about some ways that we can really engage families. This is a store-bought board book that includes a stuffed caterpillar, and as you can see, it really is three-dimensional. They've been so mindful at recreating that caterpillar to replicate the caterpillar that is featured in the book. And so you can see that it has the raised edging on the top of it. You can feel the roundness of each piece of the caterpillar. There are legs to explore, so it's a nice sensory experience for a child. This could be one example of an item that could be used in a story box for a young child if a family has the very hungry caterpillar within their repertoire of stories that they like to read to their child. We can also think about expanding the use of story boxes, and in 2000, Newbold really started thinking about, again, children with visual impairments, that they often have challenges in relating their own experiences to reading. And so Newbold suggested using just really note cards and children's experiences, and for families to create their own stories and use items found within that experience to be put into the story box as a way for a child to be able to learn about that. She really recommended that simple stories about a child's experiences be used, and that as the parent or caregiver or older sibling reads the note cards, that the child has enough time to be able to explore the item that is written on that note card. So for example, we might think about using this within an everyday routine, such as story time or bedtime, a child's lovey that they sleep with, or a bedtime story. The pajamas that they use could be put into that box as a way for a child to become familiar with not only the items in the routine, but also sequencing the routines, the order in which those items are used. Would love for folks to begin just your brainstorming, sharing ideas through the chat box if there are other ideas that are already coming to mind about other routines or experiences that we can think about the use of story boxes with. So not only using those with traditional stories, but experiences and everyday routines that a child might be unfamiliar with or beginning to participate in within their everyday life. In thinking more about this idea of capturing special occasions or a special family ritual that a family might participate in, such as a trip to grandmother's house, who lives on the beach every summer, story boxes can really be used as hands-on photo albums. Or a movie, hands-on movie, to help a child remember the shell that they found on the beach, some sands that they got to dig their hands through, maybe the sand bucket and the shovel that they used or will be using when they go to visit Grandma at the beach. And I love the ideas that folks were sharing earlier about thinking about how we can involve sounds and or smells. We could even consider putting the sound of the ocean recorded onto a phone or an MP3 player in there as another way to recreate that experience for infants and toddlers. Birthdays are another celebration that I know just in my own experience when I was providing early intervention services that families really talked about being important to them. Often for young children with disabilities, routines and experiences, they may need a bit more practice. And so I remember many families talking with me about wanting their child to be able to put the birthday candle into the cake, to be comfortable in touching the cake or opening their presents, actually having interest in the presents. And so story boxes can be another way to help families think about either preparing a child and having some direct experience with materials and items that may happen within an event, and also as a way to capture and revisit that event for a child that might not be able to see the pictures in a recreated storybook or in a homemade movie that we captured on our phone. And so as we think about introducing story boxes in early intervention, I think about many workshops that I went to and have participated in where I learned about a new strategy and really excited about trying it out. And I've learned along the way that for me, when I've taken these ideas into every family's home, it hasn't really worked in the way that I've planned. As I think about early intervention and I think about the individualization for families and kids, this might be a strategy that might work for some families and really might not work for others. And so for me, it's important for us to really think about all that we learn from families and how they can really help us to know whether or not this might be a strategy that would be useful for them. So I would love for folks to help me think about ways that this might show up within your visit, how you might learn about whether or not a story box might be a strategy that we want to think about offering a family based upon either conversations that we have or observations that we may make. What might we see or hear in an early intervention visit? Help us to know whether or not a story box might be useful. Would love for folks to use your chat box and share some ideas that you have of either families that you've worked with where this may have come up and you're now thinking that this might be a nice strategy to share.
Looks like there's a lot of ideas coming through, Lynn. Lots of really good ideas with engagement and lots of really good ideas coming in with how to use this with families. So Some of the ones that we're seeing looks like using a Pringles can, cutting a slit in the lid for an opening, talking about family experiences, and always showing pictures on their phones or wall. Any other thoughts that are coming through, folks? Just go ahead and write them in your chat box. Susan's talking about how she has used working with families who are struggling with particular routines, such as bath time, and so making a book about that with families is another idea. There's questions about where to access the book. Kelly's asking about whether books are present in the home or do they find them at the library. Where do they access them? Paula is sharing that she laminates books to coordinate with her Brown Bear books and uses Velcro and plastic figures to coordinate them with the pictures. Lots of great ideas coming through. Lynn?
There are. My gosh, I was reading along. Thanks so much. I really hope I'm going to try to figure out a way that we can type all of these up afterwards. These would really just all of your ideas in addition to the resources that we'll send at the end could really be just a nice addition for folks. So there's just so much to respond to. So in thinking about families that may not have books, books are available at the libraries. I'm always reminded of our early intervention clearinghouse and the amazing resource that is, and it's free for families here in Illinois. So I encourage you, if you have internet access, to check out the Early Intervention Clearinghouse Library and print out a list and take that to a family's home and help them to think about maybe some books that they might be able to gather from the Early Intervention Clearinghouse, or if they are near a local library, being able to access those. But again, I'm reminded that we don't have to have store-bought books. Books can be created using everyday materials from index cards, which families may have. They may not. That also might be something that I bring on a visit and create with a family and then leave with them. Introducing an idea and doing that in the context of a visit can be a wonderful way to help a family build upon this idea that they want to implement but might not really know the how-to of. For families that may not have internet access, I've often taken either my tablet or my phone and used my own internet access to pull up some ideas to share with families, just as a way to begin the conversation. And so that's just an idea that pops into my mind as a way to think about supporting families that might not have internet access. We don't really need internet access to create the box. We're going to begin thinking more about how we actually put one of those together and the items that we really might use within the story box. And so I'm wondering if we might begin to even have more ideas as we think about the step-by-step process that Norma Driscoll really outlines in the article that we'll send to you following our webinar that can be used in putting story boxes together. So let's think just a bit more about the actual process. So putting together a story box is really a three-step process. And the first step of the process is thinking about what story either we want to use that's already out there on the market, and there are lots of ideas that folks have been sharing. And there are several ideas that will be shared with you following our webinar. But just thinking about the Goodnight Moon example, choosing a story that is either important to the family, that is a child's preference, is a story that we want to think about using with a child. We can also think about using the note card idea that was suggested by Newbold and use that in a way to create stories that are familiar to the child, about experiences that they are going to have or experiences that they've already had. And so once a family chooses the story, or we've written the story that we want to use with the child, it's really then an opportunity to think about the container choice. And so here's an example of some container ideas that we can consider. Sweater-sized plastic clear boxes can be used to hold bigger books, and they also can be used to create a story library for a child with a visual impairment, or really any child who likes hands-on experience during storytelling. And so you can use plastic bins, you could use Ziploc bags, as many teachers in preschool environments have used for years to hold all of the items that they use with their flannel boards. Boxes present an opportunity for some foundational skills for young children to use, especially for children with visual impairment. As they have the opportunity to open the box, they really are creating experiences for hands-on practice, which will increase their finger strength and dexterity, which can be used for Braille reading later on. And so story boxes create not only a hands-on experience, but are providing kids with foundational skills that will help them to grow and develop throughout the lifespan. So you'll notice on this picture that I have a yellow star. And so again, teachers and folks, families and homes have really started using labels for infants and toddlers in all sorts of ways. We use pictures for kids that can see them to help know where items go, to help be able to increase kids' feelings of confidence and confidence by being able to put items where they belong and being able to find items when they want. And when we're thinking about story boxes, thinking about creating that tactile experience for a young child with visual impairments, we need to think about something more than pictures. And so as I think about Goodnight Moon, we might use a raised star or a textured star so that the child then begins to associate that or one of the other items that are found in that book to really represent that story. As I think about Goldilocks and the Three Bears, we might use 3 pieces of fur to become the label for that story box. Brown Bear might be 1 piece of fur in the shape of a bear's paw or a bear. So lots of ideas that we can think about in terms of labeling and the choice of materials that we use to hold the items within the story box. The other thing we can think about is, what are we going to put in the story box? And so again, building on this idea of the very hungry caterpillar, you can see the difference in the caterpillar that we looked at earlier in terms of the 3-dimensional aspects in relationship to this example. This example is a good example. It creates many opportunities for the child to be able to learn about the characteristics of a caterpillar. And the example that we looked at earlier provides just a bit more by adding the extra poof inside the caterpillar as well as the legs. You can also see, so I see a piece of cheese. As I think about building upon those sensory experiences, I want to take, ideas that you guys have really already shared. And so one of you talked about using scents. As I think about this piece of cheese, so it might look like a piece of cheese. It's yellow like a piece of cheese. It has holes in it like a piece of cheese. But for a child that might not be able to see that, it doesn't feel like a piece of cheese, and it doesn't smell like a piece of cheese, and it doesn't taste like a piece of cheese. So it's important for us to just think about those differences for young children in terms of their engagement and how real they need it in order for them to really be able to learn. So here's just one example of some of the items that can be used in a commonly read story in child care centers as well as in family child environments and family homes. I'm really just so grateful for all of you and the ideas that you're sharing in the chat box. So thank you so much for continuing to share those. I'm seeing a question about, can storybooks be purchased? And I'm wondering if folks have found some story boxes that they've been able to purchase. I actually haven't. I've seen lots of ideas online, but have not seen actual kits. That could be a money-making opportunity for somebody out there who has the time and the creativity to really think about this. Yeah, so folks are sharing some ideas about creating these during therapy session. And so I appreciate this idea of really involving families, that this really might not be a strategy that we would take to a family's home. Maybe we had an example to share, but this could be something we really could create in partnership with a family or a child care provider, building upon the ideas and resources that they already have within their environment. Using something that the child has within their routine can also be a really great strategy and important to think about in terms of putting into their story box. So if this is the child's bunny that they sleep with every night, this could be a wonderful item to include in a story box about bedtime routine, whether it's a book that we purchased or whether it's a book created by the family that really helps the child to experience bedtime as it happens in their life. Thanks so much for all these ideas that are being shared about where to find books on Boardmaker, using Polaroids, using your own computer and paper to do some printing for families, or taking them to the library to learn about how to use those resources on their own, and by meeting a family at the library. All sorts of ideas that folks are sharing. Thank you so much. So it's important for us to just think about a few helpful tips, just some things to consider as we think about sharing this idea and actually implementing story boxes with children and families. And so we talked about the importance of really using real items, and it's important also to think about the size of items. So for children with visual impairment, again, I'm thinking about the picture that we're looking at here. So here's a picture of a plane. Maybe this was a story box that a family thought about creating related to the trip to grandmother's house that they were getting ready to take, who lived on the beach, and that they were going to be riding in an airplane and getting into a car from the airplane to make it to grandmother's house. This airplane can be a really nice way for a child to learn about that airplane if this was going to be a toy that they might hold while flying in the airplane. But it wouldn't help the child to really learn about the airplane that they were going to ride in, because this isn't really a representation of the size of the airplane that they're going to be sitting in. If we're hoping for the child to really be able to create and learn about the experience of riding in the plane, we might consider having a seatbelt on the plane, some of the fabric that they may be feeling that's on the seat, or something like that, so that the child can really be able to experience the actual event as it's going to occur. Other helpful hints to think about is going slow. Having too many items for a child to explore within the reading of the story can be overwhelming for some children. We want to think about starting slow and really giving the child enough time to learn about that item. The parent and caregiver really expanding upon that item and talking about the features that the child is touching and exploring through their hands and through their mouth and through other senses. I'm wondering if other folks who have used storybooks in their professional practice have other helpful tips that you've learned along the way that we might share with others in thinking about how you introduce them, and tips that kids have helped you to learn along the way that helps them to learn. So use your chat box if there's any ideas that folks have to share from your own experiences in using these in your work.
We're seeing lots of great ideas coming through, folks. Really appreciate that. as you, as many of you can read, the use of a Polaroid camera, BoardMaker or BoardMakerShare.com is another resource that folks are using. There's some ideas for different books. Spider Paints is an easy book. Jennifer is sharing that idea. Patricia was sharing BoardMaker, and Carrie was sharing the BoardMakerShare.com. Jennifer uses a small plastic spider and a large plastic spider with paints. I'm guessing with the Spider Paints book. Looks like Carrie is kind of sharing a comment about the child's temperament. So I don't know, Lynn, if you want to address something about children's temperament when dealing with storybooks and storyboards.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I was just reading along there, and I appreciate folks' responses, this dialogue that everybody's really having with one another. And so again, I think about how important the family is, that they really help to guide us in knowing about their child and who their child is, and what times of the day and what routines that the child may have more of a natural tendency to kind of get revved up versus, you know, slowed down. And I think by really talking with families and listening to them, learning and asking some questions, reading our observation and our assessment skills can help us to talk through this with families. Some kids might really become excited at this experience in being able to manipulate items and explore, which might interfere with their ability to settle down at the end of the day. So I think you bring up such valuable points, and it's important for us to really think about those and talk about those with families, because we can also gather assessment information about whether these story boxes are working by using some of these strategies, talking with families about how did that go? Did it seem like your child was engaged as you introduced this new strategy? What did you notice them doing that you didn't notice them doing before when you weren't using this strategy with them? So I know that may not give you a specific answer, but I hope that it just really helps us to know that we're not doing this alone, and that families and caregivers can help us to really think about the unique learning approaches that a child might have, as well as their temperament, their own sensory needs, and those moments of the day where they may be more engaged than others.
Lynn, it looks like, too, that
well, thanks so much.
Susan was sharing the idea, the thought that how labeling can be really important, especially with children with visual impairments, something that we don't always think about. We put things in a, in a Ziploc bag, but don't always think about how we're labeling those things. So would you like to comment about that?
About labeling, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up with all of the chats, and so labeling, yes, can really help to give a child access and the opportunity to be able to identify their story. And so in thinking about labels, it's important to think about what label makes sense for the story and or the routine that we're trying to help the child learn about. And so it needs to have meaning, and we can think about using texture to increase the likelihood that a child with a visual impairment will have to be able to identify that book. So raised stickers, fabric, we can incorporate Braille. So again, the child is starting to make that association between this raised object and the written word. I'm wondering if other folks have ideas of labels that they've used in the past for children who may need more than pictures to help them identify something that is on their shelves or in a drawer. I'm seeing a question about how to get families on board with this strategy when they have extremely limited resources and time. Yes, and please, folks, share your own ideas as well so we can really build upon this topic. As I think about this, it needs to fit. And how can we help families thinking about maybe one routine that they're finding especially challenging or that's super important to them to try this out and to really start slow, start small, and see if it works. And if it works, then the parent is really experiencing success and they're seeing their child participate more. In my own experience, that then creates more opportunities to try it out in other ways. Other ideas that folks have about that before we move on to another quick poll?
There was a comment about finding ready-made story boxes, and you had indicated how you were having some difficulty finding some of those online, but there are local libraries, and I've already passed through it, I believe. And I'm sorry, I forgot who typed that in. It's gone past now, but somebody indicated that you can check them out sometimes at local libraries. And also there's been a variety of different comments about the use of Play-Doh and Velcro and all sorts of other items from the dollar stores that can be used to add to your story boxes. So, all right.
That's so great. I'm seeing some ideas of folks taking, so on a visit, I see that Jennifer's talking about going on a scavenger hunt to locate items found within the book, or when working with color books, they'll go on a color hunt with a basket. All wonderful ideas of ways to help kids and families create their own story box. It, again, is a total body experience, so kids are up and moving, they're engaged in a social relationship and a social experience, having the opportunity to use words as well as their bodies. Just wonderful ideas that folks are sharing. I also am seeing some reference to catalogs. Yes, there are a lot of Lakeshore Learning and Discount School Supply, so items that you could purchase or families could purchase to be able to put into story boxes. I would really encourage everybody to think about items that the family may have already within their home so that it is a natural experience. So if it's a story box about bath time, can we use the washcloth that the child's going to be using during their bath time? Can we use the rubber duck that the family has, purchased for them to be used within the bath experience? Or the nesting cups that they use to pour and scoop up water as they're playing in the tub. So many ideas from folks about working in partnership for families and the use of clothing items to help kids learn about those clothing items. So thinking about our season changes, we can use story boxes. As I think about all of the snow that's coming, story boxes can be a wonderful way to help young children learn about those experiences and the items that they might be wearing as they get ready to go out into the snow.
Well, it looks like you have another poll for us, Lynn. So the question to the group is, how might a child's development be supported through a story box? So again, you have 5 choices here. If you would please take a moment and indicate your answer using the poll, and we'll give folks a minute or so to respond. Lots of folks responding. That's great. Still seeing some responses coming in. That's great. Give folks a few more seconds to enter in their responses using the poll function. All right. Looks like things may have slowed down a bit, so let's see what our responses were. Wow, again, overwhelming. Everyone chose all of the above. So increasing finger strength, learning to identify an object, becoming familiar with items used in daily routines, and learning concepts such as counting and sequencing. All of those are the choices that folks have chosen. Lynn?
Yes, and so all of these skills are foundational skills that can really help all kids in becoming more literate ultimately. So going through these objects, being able to touch them and explore them and associate the words that go with them really help young children to be on the journey to learning to write and be able to read and participate in those stories. And I'm glad folks are sharing more foundational skills. I see engagement, eye contact, and motor planning. Thanks so much, Bianca, for sharing some additional skills that kids have the opportunity to learn through a story box. This really helps us as early interventionists to be able to talk about the benefits of them and the skills that young children can learn. Not only is it fun, which we know is how learning is supposed to happen for young children, but it really is giving kids an opportunity to learn in lots of different ways. And Stephanie, thanks for your comment about that many of the families that you work with might not think about the different ways that they can use the things that they have. And so as a coach and early interventionist, you have such a wonderful opportunity to be able to just share some ideas with families for them to really just think about whether or not those would work within the context of their unique family. So as we think about, before we dive into some specific resources, some additional ones that I have to share with you, you guys have really shared a lot of resources and ideas within our chat box. Susan shared with me that we will be able to capture this chat log, and so thank you. Everybody has really helped to help us have a lot of ideas.
Then there was a question.
So what other
There was a question earlier on from Katie, and she was wondering if you were going to give us an example of a story box that you've used with a family.
So I'm happy to share additional ideas with you that I have if that's something that you're wanting to hear more about, for us to really think more about routines that we can think about or conversations that we can have with families. I'm looking at the chats that are going through, and as I'm reading, I see Lori says, I'm wondering about, oh, it wasn't Lori, sorry, things scroll along. I haven't called them story boxes, but that is what I'm doing after listening to this webinar. So I'm wondering, Jennifer, if this is something you've actually done in your work, but really didn't have a term to really put along with it. I think many of us have used this strategy, maybe not in this format, but have really thought about the importance for many young children to have hands-on experiences as they are participating in those everyday stories that are being read to them either within family routines or in child care settings. I would be surprised if many of us hadn't. We just might not really have thought about putting them into this three-step process.
It appears that I don't see any other actual questions. A lot more ideas of using whipped cream and pudding for more tactile and taste type of input for children. I'm not seeing any other questions, Lynn, so if you want to move forward, we can.
Sure, great. And so the web really does have some nice resources for ideas that are appropriate in thinking about infants and toddlers. One of the really nice resources that I found and have used a lot in my work is the pathstoliteracy.org. On your screen, you're going to see two examples of story boxes that have been put on the web with step-by-step instructions by interventionists that work directly with families. There's a way that you can upload your own ideas, and so this becomes the resource for us to really learn from one another. And so you'll see that there's an example of a bedtime story box that uses Little Rabbits at Bedtime story along with items that you can recreate or share with families for them to think about. And in thinking about concepts, the idea of learning concepts through story boxes, there's also a nice resource related to teaching colors on the pathstoliteracy.org website, and it uses the story The Big Red Ball and the Little White Kitten. So check those out after we get off the webinar, or whenever you might have a little time, to see 2 examples of story boxes that were created specifically for infants and toddlers. And there really are some nice resources on the Taps and Tech website out of Arizona State. This is a partnership, and they have newsletters that you can check out. And one of the newsletters that they have is from December of 2012. And this newsletter is called Using AT to Promote Literacy in Infants and Toddlers. And it has so many ideas that we've touched upon today, ideas that build upon the ideas that you guys have shared through the chat box. And they also give some more information and some ideas related to the use of story boxes. One of the other nice features of the Taps and Tech website is there's also a library where you can put in a search for story boxes and see examples that other families and interventionists have uploaded to their site. So I think you'll find, if you go spend a little time exploring the Taps and Tech website, that you'll learn a bit more and have some other ideas that you can share with the families and childcare providers that you're working with. And Perkins.org has a Panda story kit, and that is one that can be purchased. And so they have many resources and links to a couple different blogs that you might want to check out as well, related to the use of story boxes for young children. And so those 3 websites will be included in the PowerPoint that we'll send out to you at the end of our time together. You can also check out the Paths to Literacy website to learn more about emerging literacy skills for young children. As I thought about many of the chats related to engagement strategies and easy adaptations in general to make story time more meaningful, and the pathstoliteracy.org website has many ideas to build upon related to tactile books and some other visual strategies and engagement strategies that we've all shared today. So my hope is that everybody's able to spend a little time learning about these resources and then thinking about how you might share some of these websites with families who have interest in checking out the web, who use that on a regular basis. Because again, they can help us to think about ideas that we really might not have thought about that can be really useful for their particular child and their particular learning approaches. And so I'm just kind of looking through the chat box, and I know that folks have been sharing some specific book ideas, and so I'll share a few of those before we start thinking about ending our time together. In the handouts that we'll be sending you after our webinars over today, it's a summary written by Norma Driscoll about story boxes, and she gives a variety of book ideas: Three Little Pigs, Goodnight Moon, which we talked a little bit about today. Blueberries for Sal is a book that families may often have within their library. Books by Dr. Seuss, so the Foot Book can be an idea. If You Give a Mouse a Cookie is a book that I saw in many of the child care environments that I provided supports and services in, and so I think about story boxes and taking in an example or an idea to a child care provider that I might be supporting, and helping them to think about how this might benefit really all of the kids within their environment. Sharing these resources with other interventionists that you work with can also be an idea to think about more within a staff meeting or your ongoing professional development time, how you might build upon our time today and think about this specifically within the context of the families that you work with.